Today, on Public Research, the 2-year nightmare of war begun by Hamas's October 7th killing spree has finally come to a close. And Comedy Cellar owner and host of the Live from the Table podcast, Noam Dworman, joins me to try to make sense of the last 2 years of darkness and division. During the Gaza war, Dworman's podcast became a rare space for thoughtful debate, hosting voices from Norman Finklestein to Eli Lake.
Glorifies and calls for the killing of Jews.
And Dworman has been one of the most vocal and perceptive voices, identifying the slow but steady way figures like Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson, with the help of enablers like Megyn Kelly, have been moving once fringe blood libels against Jews into the mainstream of right-wing media.
There's something deeper going on that really disturbs me. These crazy people and their views are getting normalized within the sphere of respectable conversation. You know, it was Rogan, now it's Megyn Kelly. It's like they're being body snatched. And it's like my life's mission now to make everybody stare in the face what it is and how wacky and how crazy these people really are. When Candace Owens implies that she has evidence that Charlie Kirk was feared for his life, whatever it is, you should say, well, this is the person who told me that Christian babies disappear every year on Passover. This is the person who told me that Dr. Mengele was a fraud. This is the person who told me. And you say, if you need to cite Candace Owens to make your point, maybe you need to reconsider your point.
On today's episode, we explore the shocking degrees to which anti-Semitism has become normalized on both the American left and right after 2 years of war in Gaza. We also discuss the feasibility of one-state and two-state solutions to the conflict, and debate whether Israel or its enemies have ultimately emerged as the war's true victor.
This has been going on for 75 years or 80 years, right? Because nothing works. And Israel goes to the left, they go to the right, they try peace negotiations, they get an intifada, and at some point somebody say, well, actually, maybe nothing works, and maybe all we can do is just eliminate the threat. No more rockets, no more incursions.
The irony of Netanyahu is this. His father was this historian who understood how anti-Semitic the world was. There was this anti-Semitic sort of demon that kept reoccurring. And I think Sinwar knew that better than Netanyahu. And Netanyahu didn't understand the demon he was going to conjure by doing this slow 2 years of war.
Can't pick and choose. This is not an a la carte choice here. Rearm Hezbollah, reconstitute Iran's nuclear program, give Hamas back its rockets, open up the tunnels between Egypt and Gaza again, all the status quo, all in return for Weinstein's strategy. You would do it?
Yes. All this and more on today's episode of Public Research. The first thing I want to say, because I really mean this, is during the last 2 years of the Gaza war, there were 2 Jewish Americans that I felt deserved awards for standing tall. And it was this YouTuber named Ethan Klein. Do you know him?
No, but I'll check him out. I'll find him.
He just got abused horribly by people going because his wife is Israeli, and he didn't back down.
By the way, he didn't misspeak. He doubled down on it yesterday. He said, no, I agree. That's what I think. Now, just to recap, he says, anyone that's had positive feelings at any point about the state of Israel is a neo-Nazi that's not fit to be a dog walker. Now, to me, that seems like extremely dangerous, dehumanizing language about what could arguably be 70% of the Jewish diaspora, and certainly probably people you know in your family.
I'll tell you, there's some hyperbole there, but
he didn't back down. And the other Jewish American was Noam Dworman.
That's very nice of you to say. Thank you.
Let me tell you my experience. So I've been monitoring anti-Semitism for a while. Before October 7th, I only focused on the right. side. I really didn't think there was that much of an issue on the left, really. So the Gaza war starts, and I start seeing this stuff, these comedians. I start seeing Rogan and Theo Vance having on Candace Owens, and Tim Dillon's, he's hosting Candace Owens, and what and Tucker's talking like this, and then I came across the Comedy Cellar podcast. I think one of the early ones was that Norm Finklestein Eli Lake debate.
Yeah.
And I came across, and I've been looking, and I'm like, is anyone else seeing these networks, and is anybody observing this? And I found Noam Dworman, who was seeing the exact same thing, of this emerging conspiracy, anti-Semitic thing going on. And what's crazy is there's a lot of money spent on combating anti-Semitism in America, right? And I don't want to bash the ADL because a lot of people do that, but there's the ADL. But I can't really think of that many people. Why is a comedy club owner? I don't see other people doing the kind of, talking in the way you see things in the macro perspective. So, but let me just say, sorry for rambling. Thank you.
No, go ahead.
Thank you.
So, well, I appreciate it very much. I own a comedy club, which to me is somehow just a coincidence to, how I'm involved in all this stuff. I guess it gave me some ability to get people to come on the show and stuff like that initially. Well, I think it's taken on a life of its own. I don't know why so few people are speaking up. I mean, behind the scenes, there's a lot of people who agree with us, right? But people are timid. I don't know. I don't know else how to account for it.
Well,
it doesn't speak well for our people.
Yeah, there's a lot of problems. Oh, let me also compliment you on something.
Yeah.
One of the craziest things in the last 2 years was how siloed the media is.
Can I just take it back, because it sounds, when I say it doesn't speak well for people, maybe that's flippant. It says something about, I mean, I'm my own boss, and although I'm quite worried and always conscious of not wanting to offend people who are Arabic, who are dear to me, who are close to me. I don't want to offend. Obviously, I don't want to bring unnecessary difficulty to my business with people who work with me who might disagree. So I try to choose my words carefully. Although I found that they seem to understand where I'm coming from. I have not run afoul or poisoned my personal relationships. Quite to the contrary, even though I haven't backed down. But I think, being my own boss, I can't get fired. So I can take certain risks. And I think there's a tremendous number of people out there, especially in the shadow of wokeness, where we kind of still have this reflex, are simply worried about ruining their professional lives, their social lives, not being invited to the cocktail parties, wherever it is that influential Jews are. There's some headwind that is in some way causing some amount of self-censorship.
Yeah,
That's
but with the amount of money, and I'm not trying to attack the ADL, but with
Yeah.
the amount of money being spent, where are the experts who? I mean, there's a lot of the experts that have a Israel angle, like ISGAP, Charles Small, but where are the people from the ADL who are just monitoring anti-Semitism in America in the public? It's crazy to say, but it's literally you.
Well, let me tell you. I mean, I heard Jonah Goldberg say, and I repeated it a million times, so many times that people think I said it, and I just always want to credit him for being the one I heard it from. I'm not even sure if he said it first. That personal relationships are more corrupting than money. And no truer thing has ever been said. And when you get to be Jonathan Greenblatt, you are so intertwined with so many people, particularly in the Democratic Party, that I believe, despite your best intentions, I'm not even saying that if I were in his shoes, I would be different. I don't know, but it became so intertwined with the Democrats, with certain politicians, with this and that. They no longer spoke in a purely truthful way. There's no other way to describe it. You just alluded to something, so maybe you're going to even disagree with it. But early on, they expended so much energy on the notion that Trump was this anti-Semite, which to me was just like, this is madness. Like, Kushner is an Orthodox Jew, is like, yes, he made a joke from time to time, same kind of jokes we make, right? About being business people, or, who knows what he even said. But my take very early on was, well, if Trump is an anti-Semite, with enemies like this, who needs friends? Because it was so clear to me he was standing up for the Jewish people. But this is the ADL. So go ahead. Sorry.
But
Yeah.
my point is much more basic. Let me ask you a question. Who's the anti-Semitism expert at the ADL? Just name.
Don't mention. Know.
Yeah, you can't name any.
Well, I don't know much about the ADL,
But the fact that, like, there should be a brilliant guy, and if they want to pay me, they can do it. There should be a guy who's like, what we're seeing this year is there's a grouping around this character, and what they're really doing. I can't really name that person. I know there's a guy named Mark Pitcairn, but he's not out there. But anyways, let me get back to another.
I mean, there is another problem with these ADL groups, is that they're hammers and they're looking for nails all the time, and then because they found so many nails, they lost credibility in a certain sense. They didn't keep their powder dry, to mix my metaphors, and they screamed anti-Semitism. I'm sorry to say, they screamed it so many times that me, as a highly motivated Jew on the lookout for anti-Semitism, I'm like, oh, come on. I know 20 Jews who have the same opinion, and you guys are calling. And by the time you, and when we needed them, like we really need them now, they don't speak with authority. They no longer have the respect of people, because an ADL group should position itself not out in front calling anti-Semitism all the time, but as a sober group that, as I said, keeps its powder dry, and when it speaks, it carries a wallop. That's what it should be. And they're not that. They're seen as trigger happy. That's a third metaphor, I guess.
Right. So another thing I want to compliment you on is, during the last 2 years, I swear to God, the only two shows, and actually I did it a little bit, I'm proud to say, that sort of brought the two sides together to talk were you and an Israeli guy named Adar Weinrob on his show.
So many people keep telling me I need to meet that guy.
But you were number one. And I have the same instincts as you. The people with the war coming in, and one bittersweet part is I can't interview more anti-Zionist Jews and ask them, you say it's a genocide in Gaza. How many times did you ask Egypt to open the border? Oh, zero? Okay. Yeah. But, there was almost none of that, but you did that. And so thank you for that as well.
Yeah, I appreciate it. It's interesting to me, right? Like that, I'm not the type of person who wants to spend another hour speaking to somebody I agree with. As a matter of fact, I do these podcasts sometimes with the people I agree with. Yeah. And I'm not like super excited to do them. It's not like I'm like, I know that I'm just going to look like it's a mutual admiration society. I understand how it appears. It doesn't persuade anybody or very few people. And I prefer to be speaking to the Bartovs of the world every day. But it's, fewer and fewer want to come on my show.
That is the problem. It's hard to get those guests.
And by the way, none of them have ever been treated unfairly on my show. None of them have ever been asked a gotcha question. None of them have ever been, it's very above the belt, I feel. Any contentious interview that I've done with anybody, for college professors and those types of people to shy away from these things, it really speaks to their own insecurities about their positions. Because I'm not afraid to talk to anybody.
I don't know if it just drives me nuts, and hopefully I'm going to be able to ask it. I haven't. I did ask it to Peter Beinart, but he sort of evaded the question. But like
He's
I would,
evasive.
like anti-Zionist Jews, like the most obvious question in the world, you just never hear them ask. Anti-Semitism is rising. You want to get rid of a safe haven for the Jews as your life goal? Why? Like, such a basic question.
I don't know what to make of Peter Beinart. I had some dealings with him in my personal life, and he was pleasant enough, but you're right. Just the. And by the way, he did a debate with Alan Dershowitz on YouTube where he was quite good, I have to say. Like, he made some very strong points. He's not a hack.
Brilliant, genius.
Yeah. But this notion of a one-state solution that somebody brilliant, like you say, could imagine it working out as a first of all, just that it wouldn't descend into bloodshed merely among the Palestinians, right? Let alone you have a group of people here who have bloodshed throughout the Middle East in their own tribal problems. And then you would imagine, well, no, the one tribal people that they're going to get along with beautifully, in an American type polyglot is going to be the Jews, the Jews who are an evil character in their religion, in the text of their religion. And and to give a slightly longer answer, this is very important. The Muslims and the Arabs are not a character in our culture or our religion. They became a character in our modern history because they are the people who we deal with in Israel. But other than that, I mean, I remember, growing up, there's no, in other words, if there was peace between the Israelis and the Arabs, we then are finished with we check that off our list. We have no inherent cultural animosity towards the Arabs, right? But it's not a mirror image. Judaism and the Jews are a black letter character in the Muslim religion. And to the extent that some Muslims have moderated, or if 80% of the Muslims moderated, I don't profess to be an expert in Islam, and people people I know who are close to me are very offended by things Sam Harris says, although I think he knows quite a lot. So I don't want to take a position on that, but it's some large number of Muslims are radicalized and believe that their religion teaches them these things about Jews. So and some large number, I mean, and that's Hamas at least, and we don't know how many people beyond Hamas think that way. So the notion that you're going to have a one-state solution with that huge number of people and not have bloodshed, let alone freedom of religion, freedom of speech, gay right, like this is insanity. And he's gonna break this country if he had his way. Sorry, I just almost finished. On the altar of trying to redress, let's say for the sake of argument, let's stipulate injustices of 1948, which can't be undone, right? Like whatever went wrong there, I don't think that way. But I'm just gonna stipulate. Let's say the Jews are the bad guys in the story of 1948. You can't undo it. Like there is no undoing it. And more than half the Jews in Israel now, quite a bit more than half, don't even come from Europe. And they're not going back to the Arab world. Like they're not going back to Morocco and Iraq. So it's here to stay, just like many, many countries have been built on injustices of the past,
they're
like the United States of America, by the way. So what the fuck is he thinking? And my last question is it not some sort of, forgive me, I'm just being frank, is it not some sort of psychological mental condition? Like, this is not a rational position.
Can I show you something? Screen share
Sure.
something? You haven't seen my Beinart interview, have you?
I might have seen a clip of it somewhere, actually, now that you
Okay.
mention it. Show it to me.
Let me show you this part. So I made a video for Peter.
Mhm.
So when Assad fell and the Alawites were being
Yes.
persecuted,
Yes.
I made this little thing to illustrate what Israelis feared.
The unification of Israel and the Palestinian territories was meant to usher in a new era of coexistence. But less than 2 weeks after the creation of the joint state, violence is spreading, and many Jewish citizens are fleeing. Armed Arab groups have launched attacks in cities targeting the homes of former IDF officers and Jewish public figures. Synagogues were defaced or burned. Thousands are now trying to leave by air and by sea. The new Arab-majority government has condemned the violence, but enforcement on the ground is weak. Observers say police are hesitant to confront armed militias, though both the IDF and Palestinian groups had agreed to disarm before unification. Intelligence suggests Iran has funneled weapons to a new militia known as the Islamic Retribution Forces. Jewish leaders say most of their community is preparing to emigrate. Meanwhile, Iran's foreign minister praised what...
I'll just stop it there. How much of you fears that if your ideas ever came to pass that you would watch a news report like that?
How much?
Can
what?
I
I'm
ask?
sorry.
Can I, in a very Jewish fashion, ask?
Sorry?
I didn't say. What was your question? How much what?
I asked how much of you fears that if
how much of you? Go,
that,
sorry,
that
go
would happen, yeah.
Answer your question with a question.
Sure, sure.
How many Palestinians do you know well?
Personally, or have I spoken to?
No, like person, like you have relationships with them, you have friendships with them, you talk on a regular basis about
No,
these
I don't. But I have interviewed more than a few, yeah.
First of all, I think it's great that you're doing that, and I applaud you for that. I would just say this. I don't have a crystal ball. I can't predict the future. So I can't say with 100% certainty that any scenario is impossible, including the terrible one that you're suggesting. What I can say is this. In my experience, overwhelmingly, that Jews who know Palestinians better, under conditions in which they can come to know them as human beings, under conditions of some relative equality, because you need some relative equality to truly get to know someone as a human being. You can't have that kind of relationship, when you have when one person is a soldier and one person is the person at the checkpoint under the soldier. Or you couldn't have had that kind of relationship in the segregated South between whites and blacks very easily. But in my experience, overwhelmingly, the Jews who know Palestinians best, under conditions that allow them to interact with them as equals, are the most confident that Jews and Palestinians can live together equally. Because although I know that you didn't mean in that video to suggest anything racist or dehumanizing about Palestinians.
It was racist. It was wrong of me. Shame on me.
Well, okay. So let me. You want me to comment on that?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's madness, of course, because who takes a chance like that and then I'm gonna get to another part, but like, okay, if you told me that so and so lived in is a descendant of somebody who chased my grandparents out of a house and now they live in that house and blah blah, I would not imagine that I would want to go to another country and take that house back. I would acknowledge the injustice, and certainly in the modern world, if we decide that injustices were done to Palestinians, obviously most of them are dead, but their descendants who have some legacy right to what would have been their property, then these things are handled relatively easily with money. And the case would be that Israel should pay, and I think this was the talk when they were negotiating, to pay, some sort of check to people who can make the claim that but the notion that the Palestinians have this urge to live in Israel with the Jews, that he doesn't understand that this is a weird urge. No, we don't want our own country. We want to live with the Jews. Now, that's just not true, right? Anybody knows that's just not true. So I don't get that. Now, as far as his comment about knowing Palestinians, I happen to know Palestinians very well, and I happen to grow up around Arabic people my entire life, and they've been very frank with me about how they feel about Jews. And it's a weird thing because they can simultaneously be dear friends, devoted, and even share, like I remember we had this one guy I knew very well who would tell me, "No, I'm sorry, but when you die, you're going to spend eternity 1 mile from the sun, burning." Because he says, "I'm sorry." He said, "I'm sorry, my friend. That's what we believe." So I know them, but the Palestinians that I know and the people who are close to Palestinians are quite on. They quite agree that a bloody civil war is a very likely outcome of not just a one-state solution, but even a Palestinian state. I mean, what happened in Gaza immediately after Israel withdrew? It was a bloody civil war, right? So what's Beinart's like? Was he? We don't need the Jews in this recipe. We've seen it. Why would it be any different? It doesn't make any sense. And he's ready. And he's ready to risk the entire project on this.
As I told him, I made that video out of footage of how the Alawites,
Yes.
fellow Muslims were treated in Syria, months ago. So it wasn't like some crazy race. I didn't have to AI generate that. Yeah.
Daniel, let me tell you something. This is very important. And this is, I always want to say this. I don't think I've said it on here. So I asked Tyler Cowen, who, if everybody doesn't know who Tyler Cowen is, I think he's like just the smartest, most person who considers things the least hysterically and emotionally. And he's just somebody should always find out his opinion on anything before they solidify their own. Anyway, I was asking him, it wasn't this situation, but it was something similar. I said, how can people be so smart and come to opinions which seem clear to me just to be absurd? Like, you imagine smart people rising above their biases and coming to logical conclusions. And he said to me that brilliant people use their brilliance in the service of their emotions. And that he didn't add this caveat. And that's what makes them so dangerous, meaning that the way I see it, it's a mental overlay. Peter Beinart is brilliant, and he's turning this brilliance into the service of some psychological issue at the heart of this matter. Guilt. I don't know what it is, but you cannot tell me that any rational person thinks that there is, I mean, nobody knows the future, but if you think that there's a 15% chance of the entire nation devolving into a bloodbath, you don't take that risk. You don't advocate for that risk because obviously the solution is partition.
Well,
it's simple as that. Like, who's going to gamble with this kind of stuff?
I hope to have on Peter again, so I should just say I find him very kind and very smart, and I'd love to have him on again.
I do too.
Yeah. So there's a lot I want to touch. So let's go to the news of the day. 2 years into this nightmare of the Gaza war, it appears to be over. I have my take. You say you like to argue. I think you might find something to argue with in my take. But looking back, who outsmarted the other, Sinwar or Netanyahu? Who got the better?
It's like the Joker and Batman need each other.
Who won this war?
Okay, well, I'll tell you this. I think that, well, who won the war? I can tell you who lost was the Palestinian people, who so many of whom died, and the ones who are living are in a kind of day-to-day life, which is very hard for us to imagine. I've tried, like, what does it mean? Even like, what are the bathroom situations? How do they shower? What does it mean to have stress for food? Who the hell knows what they're going through? But we measure so much in terms of the number of people who have died that can fail to really consider, you know, just to imagine what their day-to-day life is for the foreseeable future. So they are the losers here, and you know, it would be nice. It would be very, very important if 20 years from now they were thriving, and we could say the war was the turning point in that future, rather than just something that didn't have any positive results. So the winners, well, Israel is a winner for sure, because Hezbollah is destroyed, Iran is impotent. As I heard somebody say, Israel is, vanquished all its enemies in the Middle East now, and in that sense, Israel's the winner. Worldwide Judaism is a loser, because we are an asterisked people who, whenever anybody asks what you are now, there's going to be a little hesitation, because it reminds me when I was a kid, when somebody would say they were German or South African. Now when somebody says they're Jewish, that's what we have. I fear that once Israel gets the hostages back, and I fear that this is Hamas's strategy, that once Israel gets the hostages back, that will be the last bit of motivation that the Israeli people have to continue this war. And at that point, even if Hamas agrees to something or doesn't agree, or they agree and then just don't do it, Israel will never be able to summon the will to restart its military battle against Hamas. And I fear there's an outcome here, which is Israel gets the hostages back and Hamas doesn't leave power. And all the rest of it just never happens. I think that early in the war, the hostages fueled Israel and were a problem, that were leverage for Hamas. They had to fight the war carefully. They were hamstrung. They would stop for a ceasefire because the hostages, Hamas could use the hostages. I think at this point, Hamas is the one who kind of wants to get rid of the hostages. Giving it back, I'm afraid that giving the hostages back is now Hamas's best offensive tactic. That's what I think.
Well, this is good because we sharply disagree on this.
Okay, good.
I think Israel lost this war. I think the anti-Israel movement, Hamas won this war. And it's funny.
Can I just because the war's not over? In other words, you think if Hamas leaves power, and if the Trump plan comes to fruition, you think Israel lost the war?
I mean the anti-Israel movement won the war. So their cause won the war. As far as demonizing Israel, destroying Israel's reputation with the entire generation.
Yeah, but you have to put that on each timeline, meaning that if I don't necessarily disagree with you, but I'm saying, but I understand that if 10 years from now, Hamas is out of power and Gaza is getting investment and things are better, then people will forget very quickly how they felt about this war now, because it's like Vietnam versus Korea. We remember how awful Vietnam was because there's nothing to show for Vietnam. Korea could have been the Vietnam War, except there is this wonderful South Korea to show for it. And nobody's going back to remember how we felt about dying in Korea, not dying here, because the outcome has justified the war in retrospect. The outcome of Gaza can justify the war, but if it doesn't, then of course you're right.
No, I think this is just another round, just much more bloodier, just much more damaging. I think defeating Hamas was a stupid goal for a number of reasons. One, it's a phantom goal. I mean, they already destroyed 50 of their top leaders, so how do you define when it's done? Also, let's be honest, like, the population agrees with Hamas mostly. I mean, there's not a lot of disagreement, right?
So does the Palestinian.
Right.
So do they on the West Bank, but the West Bank is not.
So you get rid of Hamas, will be another group named Hamas. You know what I mean? But let me tell you how my evidence for why Israel lost the war. It's funny. I was listening to a podcast today, and the evidence was right there for why Israel lost. So I was just listening to a podcast, and this is what I hear right at the start.
Type of thing that I'm sure you will enjoy if you listen to the show. And I will just say before we get into it that this interview was initially recorded for 92NY, based in New York. Basically, they were interested in having a conversation with Jacob about the new book. I was invited to do that interview, and I figured if Jacob is going to come on the show anyway, I just wanted to give you that context, especially if you hear mention of 92NY in the audio of this episode. And I know someone online pointed out that 92NY is apparently an organization that supports the Israeli government. If that's the case, it's not something that I was aware of before doing this interview. I was asked to do it to support Jacob. So just so you have that context if you were wondering about it. So with that said, if you enjoy this conversation...
So he's got to apologize.
Yeah, I get
for
that,
even going to a venue that this ideology of Zionists or Nazis. I mean, there's this whole compilation.
Any kind of,
this existed
regardless
before
of
the
your
war,
background.
No, but the degree to which it's spread is
okay.
It's crazy.
You really have to. I'm being a little bit devil's advocate here, but you really have to not jump to a conclusion that what we're seeing now at the height of this issue, there's a half-life to it, and the question is how long is the half-life, and that half-life is quite affected by how things turn out. For instance, just the fact that the Arab world is on board with Israel now in terms of what it sees as what the solution ought to be, this is very, very important. Israel didn't have and doesn't have much choice. I remember my father in 2003 when he was dying, he's like, I don't think Israel's going to make it, because he kind of saw this inexorable progress. But you have a situation where technology is marching on, and Israel can't have a military Hamas on its border. It just can't have that anymore. We saw what happened in Russia. I was saying this a couple months ago, but now I heard even Tom Friedman said it, which made me rethink. But there's access to these drone swarms at $100 a pop. Israel can't live that way anymore. 10 years from now, they have to try. It may not be possible, but there is a triage. And survival is first, and then the war for Jewish acceptance is second. But their survival is first, and you're ignoring the triage.
But they gave up control of the Rafah crossing. Listen, I think Israel was totally justified to go in there and fight Hamas. I think Netanyahu fought dumbly. And here's my question for you. There's a clip, and I think he'd be great on your show, Eric Weinstein.
Yeah, I know him, yeah.
Yeah. There's a clip that haunts me.
About taking the land? Where he says we should take the land?
Fine, I don't... If you remember it, do you remember what he said?
I think he said you should give like a series of escalating ultimatums, and every time they don't do it, we say we're taking this land and we're annexing it. Taking this land and we're annexing it.
I have it right here, but I just want to play it because he says this one thing that I think is so brilliant.
Yeah.
That's very
The
important.
right thing to have done, in my opinion, is very simple. We have a schedule. You're interested in rape? Here's how many acres we will annex. You interested in murder? You interested in blowing up families? Here's the schedule of the acreage that you will lose. We will have an annexing ceremony, and we will name it after your victims. And it'll be permanently a part of Israel. And so that way, when you do something to us where you're begging us to kill you and your children, to blow up your buildings, to bulldoze your houses, we're not going to fall for it anymore. What we're going to do is we're going to have a ribbon-cutting ceremony. And what we're going to see is a larger and larger and larger state of Israel as your moronic death cult continues to grind against innocent life. So rather than have a single death, you're going to have a transfer of acreage. I'm trying to say that in the cycle of violence, what is sought by the architects of murder, misery, and horror is reprisal. Physical, kinetic reprisal. I'm saying deny them that. Look, you've got a terrible situation. Okay. This is a completely different sort of an enemy. And my claim is the story of Israel exercising power over Arabs who are not Israeli citizens is a cancerous story. And if Israel does not figure out how to get out of that story, even to the point where it's got a state that it has to go up against in a war, Israel is being induced into a game theory according to the local rules of the Middle East.
So, what haunts me about that is I just imagine, and I understand maybe Biden wouldn't have allowed it, but it could have started right when Trump got in, where Israeli troops could have basically gotten out of Gaza, maybe stayed at Rafah, and said, we're not going to be dropping any more bombs. Here's the new policy. Every week, every 2 weeks, you hold the hostages, or every month, we're going to take 1% of Gaza. We're going to have a ribbon-cutting ceremony, permanently annex it. And just do that, since Hamas doesn't care about their people, they care about land, and not give the TikTok more bloody images. Because, of course, I mean, what the irony of Bibi Netanyahu is this. His father was this historian who understood how anti-Semitic the world was. There was this anti-Semitic sort of demon that kept reoccurring. And I think Sinwar knew that better than Netanyahu. And Netanyahu didn't understand the demon he was going to conjure by doing this slow 2 years of war. And he's sort of like a guy who steals like a pack of gum from a store, but gets indicted for killing everyone in the store and stealing all the products. He's accused of genocide. Israelis are called Nazis. They've done a genocide. It's a Holocaust. So all this horrible PR damage, but no long-term strategic gain. What it says, he was brutal and weak. He kept bombing, but he was too weak to say every month we are taking land.
Well, I mean, I don't know. It taking land, does that mean throwing the Palestinians who live there off their land? Does that mean incorporating the Palestinians into Israel?
No,
increasing the number of people? So I don't know that Hamas was going to stand down for, parcels of empty land. Maybe, you've heard me maybe talk about my spoiled child theory of history. Did you hear me say this?
No.
I say, like, when you see a kid who's acting out, like, really acting badly, and you look at the parents, and the parents are very, very strict, like really very strict. And you say, well, of course he's acting out. Look at his parents. They never give him a moment's peace. They're always, punishing him and reprimanding him, and they're on top of him all the time. They don't give him any freedom. But look, of course that's the kid. Or you see the same kid and his parents are very permissive. And you say, well, of course he's permissive. I mean, they don't put any rules. They don't set limits. They indulge him. They're solicitous, But it's really, it's neither. It's the kid is the problem. And no matter what strategy is taken to deal with this kid, it doesn't work. And then we focus on the dumb strategy. And that's kind of how I feel about Hamas. There is no strategy that will work because, I think you already said, it's a death cult, right? Death cults are not that responsive.
They care about land, though.
Really? I don't know. They don't seem to care about their own lives. So you could be right, but the Israelis are not dumb, and they're not. It's not as if they don't have experts that speak Hamas around them. It's not as if they don't have infiltration into this stuff. And my feeling is I might have thoughts about maybe this was done, maybe it wasn't, but I'm very hesitant because it's a constant loop tape. Something is tried, it doesn't work out, and the people who then oppose it said, you see, I told you it wouldn't work, and this has been going on for 75 years or 80 years, right? Because nothing works. And Israel goes to the left, they go to the right, they try peace negotiations, they get an intifada, and at some point somebody say, well, actually, maybe nothing works. And maybe all we can do is just eliminate the threat. no more rockets, no more incursions, no more, offensive weapons, no more nuclear in Iran, no more missiles in Hezbollah. Like, because would Weinstein's strategy have gotten rid of Hezbollah? Would Weinstein's strategy have gotten rid of Iran's nuclear program? No.
No, actually, you could argue it would have made it easier. There would have been less ground troops in Gaza.
If they were not going to leave Hamas alone and go to Lebanon. So, like, if you really start thinking it through, you begin to realize, I didn't think of that. I didn't think of that.
It's a question of how big the damage to. I think the generational damage. I mean, so this.
Well, let me, Daniel. I'll ask you this way: if you could wind the clock back, rearm Hezbollah. Reconstitute. You can't pick and choose. This is not an a la carte choice here. Rearm Hezbollah. Reconstitute Iran's nuclear program. Give Hamas back its rockets. Open up the tunnels between Egypt and Gaza again. All the status quo. All in return for Weinstein's strategy. You would do it?
Yes. Yeah, I would.
Well, you better. I think. You should have a low degree of confidence, even if that's where you're leaning.
No, you're definitely right on Iran and Hezbollah.
But you can't take it a la carte. It's this one thing.
No, but I do. I was literally thinking about that. If Israel had just not even gone into Gaza in a major way, I do think they'd be. And this is the thing I wanted to talk about. You sort of look at the right. You're able to do one thing I can't do. You can sort of bear listening to Candace Owens, her voice, and Tucker. By the way, I don't know if you know any billionaire tech investors. Do you?
No, not billionaire. Okay. I know millionaire tech investors.
They need to. These LLMs are. I like them, but boy, they can't research shit. I've been trying to get them to give me weekly reports just on everything Candace Owens says. It can't do anything. It can't get a transcript.
Well, there's a website called Filmot, Filmot, that you can look up YouTube transcripts, but it's weak at looking up YouTube transcripts. That's soon enough. But do you use ChatGPT with deep research?
Oh, I do, but it's not very.
It's pretty good, I think.
It's not as good as it should be. But anyways, I gave up on the right. A long time ago. And it's funny, I researched the right very closely. And then on October 7th, I made a decision. I just can't handle looking at these Nazis anymore while this war is going on. It's just too much stuff. So I have not looked at the right unless I've had to with the sort of Tucker stuff. I haven't gone out of my way to look at them since October 7th. But I've been looking at the left. And I don't know, how much of the left do you pay attention to?
I mean, I don't know. It seems like the left and right, I don't even see it as left and right anymore. I just see it as one anti-Israel gestalt or anti-Jewish, I mean, Tucker Carlson is on the right. Glenn Greenwald is supposedly on the left, right? Cenk Uygur is on, are they right and left? They might be right and left on tax policy. Right. There's no distance between them on Israel.
Yeah, well, I don't want to depress you, though. I'm sure I'm going to say this, and you're going to be like, yeah, I already knew that. But I always thought the left was going to be the bulwark for Jews, standing up against anti-Semitism.
No, that was idiotic. Sorry.
Yeah.
You should have known better.
Well, I thought it was better in the right. Well, and it's still arguing.
No, it wasn't. It was the right. And we don't know. Like, I just saw a poll today that still shows that even now the right is like 85% pro-Israel or among right-wing voters. The right. This is the thing. We don't know, and nobody's been more scared about it than I am, about how this new anti-Semitism Rogan is not an anti-Semite, but he's been responsible for fueling these people. No, I think and maybe he's been quiet lately, so maybe he actually has had second thoughts, but he's responsible for a lot of these people who are now famous. Their path to fame was through the Rogan show, right? Ian Carroll also. So they, I don't know where that's going, but what does the right believe traditionally? The right believes in Western values. The right is skeptical of cultural relativism. The right is, for better or worse, is anti-Islamic. The right is not compatible with the issues that are normally deleterious to Jewish interests. The left believes in judging people by the color of their skin. The left believes that Jews are privileged, that indigeneity favors the brown people, the Arabs, everything that the left and even down to like issues like affirmative action, like everything that the left believes, 100% of what they believe is not compatible with a pro-Israel position. Period. End of story.
Yeah, no, I think people can argue. I don't think it's important, that debate. My only point is this: just how bad it's gotten on the left.
But why would you think they'd be the bulwark? Because
You're
talking about the left in like 1975.
No, well, most of the world before October 7th, boy, that it was just shattered. But there was a very serious, like, the people that were studying neo-Nazis in America were left-wing accounts before October 7th. And then there was the blue sky schism, which is very important, which people don't talk about enough. So now they're all siloed. They can't even research fascists, so they're pretty much irrelevant, and they just yell about Ezra Klein. But anyways, they were the people that cared about Nick Fuentes and stuff like that. So I'm not going
to any milieu that believes that one has to have land acknowledgments is not going to be an ally of Israel. Well, just understand the patterns here.
I would make a very strong argument that every Jew should become a Democrat right now, because stopping J.D. Vance should be a top priority unless you want Tucker in the Oval Office. But
no, I'm afraid of J.D. Vance too. But it remains to be seen if Rubio. We don't know,
right.
and that's why I'm fighting like tooth and nail. But the fact is that, thank God, Kamala Harris didn't win.
Yeah, no. I'm just saying, if it's Vance versus J.B. Pritzker, even though I don't like J.B. Pritzker, I'm voting for Pritzker.
Yeah, Vance. Or what? Actually, somebody said, what if it's Vance versus AOC?
Oh, don't even get me started. But okay. So let me ask you this: are you aware that people on the left have started using the Nazi term Zog?
No.
Do you know the term Zog is?
Is it Z for Zionist?
Yeah, Zionist occupied government. This is literally a term that David Duke came up with. This hardcore neo-Nazi clan. Do you know Max Blumenthal, Aaron Mate's?
I know, actually, I have to confess, I know Aaron Mate, and we've always had a nice relationship. Blumenthal. Well, I'll let you make your point. Go ahead.
Well, next time you have on Aaron Monte, show him the clip of Max Blumenthal saying, "I believe in the term Zog," using it, and they both laugh at it.
I used to think Zionist-occupied government was an anti-Semitic term. Now I'm forced to see it as a pretty accurate description of the reality we live in as one nation under Zog. And I don't know how any of very few major journalists can even see this and look it in the face.
One nation under Zog, that's the term Zionist occupied government. I mean, yeah.
Well, you saw how Blumenthal came at my friend Coleman.
Oh, he's vicious. He's vicious.
He said Coleman was getting his notes from food handlers.
Yeah.
And you're like, what that? And the same thing I say about Beinart. Like, Blumenthal is not stupid. He's been right about some things. His book had some prescient moments. Like, he's a savvy analyst of trend lines in Israel. Blah 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 blah. But it's a sick psychology, isn't there? Where he's obviously fueling this fire in his own way that the Jews killed Charlie Kirk, and then from time to time you're lucky enough to have 100% full knowledge of something which is being discussed in the news. Like, or, like I have 100%, not 99%, 100% of everything about Coleman Hughes and that debate with Dave Smith. I can tell you on the lives of my children that Coleman Hughes did not get any notes or any research from any Zionist handlers or Likud. He is not tied with them. He doesn't get any money. He thinks for himself. Even I, a close friend of his, not only am I helpless to persuade him, but I don't even presume to try. In other words, when Coleman and I, like early on, if I ever, like we both sample books of the left and the right. There's nothing about the conclusions that Coleman arrives at that he hasn't arrived at on his own.
Oh, well, he said...
And it's such a smear.
Oh, of course, yeah.
So I guess the point I'm trying to make, so when I know, and if public to the extent they believe me, and I hope some people hear it, if you believe that I'm telling you that what Max Blumenthal said is 100% made up, then you have to acknowledge that other things he's saying can also be 100% made up. And that is fucking reprehensible.
Yeah. One thing that drives me nuts is the way that a lot of Jewish organizations have focused on people on campus or whatever saying these terms. Free Palestine, from the river to the sea, globalized intifada. Focusing on that and ignoring what I think is so much more insidious, so much more violence-inducing, and it's just not talked about enough, which is this ideology that has captured, I fear, a majority of the young left, which is this: Zionists are the new Nazis. And I think people hear them say that and write that, and they sort of think it's just rhetoric, it's just a joke. They don't mean that, surely. Surely they don't think the victims of the Tree Life shooting, who were all Zionists, were just another form of Nazi, like the guy who shot them. It's worse than that. These young people on the left, they literally think you are worse than Nazis. That's why they're willing. I have these clips of Emma Vigeland from the Majority Report and all these people.
If here it is, billionaire Bill Ackman says Candace Owens has slandered him with her claims this afternoon about tensions between Ackman and Charlie Kirk over Israel in the days leading up to Kirk's assassination. She did have a response where I think, she made a variety of different accusations, including an $150 million campaign that she says was going to be directed at Tucker Carlson for his critique of Israel. So, I don't believe any of these people, but I'm rooting for the fight.
Who are saying, I like what Candace Owens is doing. I like what Tucker's doing, saying Jewish donors might have killed Charlie Kirk, because they're anti-Israel. They laugh about it. Because me and you we are the evil in the world. Most Jews, Zionists, are the true evil of the world. And they believe that. I mean, there's a show called Leftist Mafia, and they let this woman come on named Blakely. I am Blakely on Twitter.
Let's welcome Blakely, our guest. They are a political content creator, a pro-Palestinian streamer, and badass as hell. But Blakely, you've been dealing with some bullshit lately with YouTube. Tell the people what's going on.
Yeah, so thank you again for having me, Mike, and nice to officially meet all of you other guys. So what happened? Sorry, I'm actually kind of...
This is a woman who does spaces with Nazis. She praises Nick Fuentes, Candace Owens. And this is a show where they would never let you on if you had ever said that I don't think men should play in women's sports. Okay? Or if you had anything to do with Israel. But, you
mean trans women. Go ahead.
Yeah. But, you praise Nick Fuentes all day? Oh, come on. Come on, the Leftist Mafia. That's fine. Do you know Pod Save America?
I know of it. I don't know if I've ever heard more than just clips of it. Yeah.
Huge show. It's like these Obama speechwriter guys.
That's the guy who was Obama's guy who was involved in the Iran negotiation. What's his name?
Ben Rhodes.
Ben Rhodes, is he on that?
Yeah. And there's a guy, Tommy Vietor. And Tommy Vietor, I would never have thought this. He's now praising Tucker Carlson and whitewashing his anti-Semitism.
I'm a Tucker fan now. Are you a Tucker fan now too? MTG is the one making the smartest substantive points against this war. I reached out to Tucker Carlson to see if he would talk to me about this set of issues. He called me within like a minute of me texting him, but I came away from that conversation feeling like he is very sincerely worried about what's happening with this war. And hearing him and Bannon talk about why presidents keep getting pulled into war, they end up in a more conspiratorial place than I do. Like, they think it's the deep state. I think there's a little truth to that, but it's more like there's just a permanent inertia in Washington towards action.
It's not like, you know, when things happen in Sweden or the UK, where my ancestors are from, people aren't quite as emotional. It's very emotional. I don't want to get involved in any of this because, again, people are so emotional. And I think most Americans don't. And it's only because
we're inexorably getting drawn into a war.
By a tiny minority of people. Like, why do we allow 3% of the participants in this conversation to define
the Young Turks? Remember the Young Turks? You know, they're both open anti-Semites now.
Yeah. Actually, I saw her doing this Jew thing on. I don't know, but you know, you can take something like that out of context. I didn't see the.
Oh, no! I sure. There's so many things, and they're posting these Nazi memes. I mean, literally, they're using Nazi terms. It's really bad.
It ain't good. It ain't good.
So, is the American alliance going to end soon? Do you think?
Well, I don't have a prediction about that. I mean, you know, when anyone becomes president, and we've seen this over and over, we saw it with Obama, and then they actually are presented with the realities of the world, you would imagine that they very quickly realize that Israel is quite important. It's our outpost in one of the most crucial parts, if not the most crucial part of the world. It's our outpost it's for intelligence, for military cooperation in the event there needs to be one, and culturally. So, not fueled by anti-Semitism, I can't imagine cutting ties with Israel. The question is, like, you know, do we continue to sell them arms or give them arms? You know, it's possible that we start putting more strings on things. You know, when I was a kid, it hasn't always been this way. There's problems that kids don't realize it. Like, I remember when I was a kid, George H.W. Bush wouldn't sell AWACS, or wouldn't not sell AWACS to Saudi Arabia, and they wouldn't give loan guarantees to Israel. You know, it might return to a somewhat less lovey-dovey relationship that it was at a time we were still pro-Israel. You know, the James Baker, Scowcroft, George H.W. Bush team, they were not in a bear hug with Israel as we are now. I think that's more likely. I don't think any responsible American administration is going to cut ties with Israel. No.
I want to end on Israel, but before that, can I tell you my theory about what's driving the increase in anti-Semitism on the right? No.
Yeah,
I
sure.
got to write this up because I want credit for it before
Well,
someone does it.
Copyright and trademark. Go
Yeah.
ahead.
The far right in America is becoming more diverse. Okay, you've got Hispanics there, you got some Muslims, or Egyptians. You know, it as the country becomes more diverse. The consequences of this is that racism is obviously sort of a tricky area, right? Because if all the faces at the meeting aren't white, you know, it's a little bit more awkward to talk about race. So the new solidifying agent of the American far right increasingly is anti-Semitism. You might be black, you might be from Egypt, you might be brown, but we all hate the Jews. And that's what I think is happening. And I really think there's a generational thing going on. Young people, they're anti-Semitic for many reasons. I think The most obvious other reason is all the Holocaust survivors are dying. No one remembers the Nazis. And of course, like clockwork, it's back. You know what I mean? What do you think of that?
There's something to that for sure. Yeah, I mean, I was saying already like 7, 8, 10 years ago that the young generation sees the past as a black and white movie where bad things like that don't happen anymore. And the generation, my father's generation, that lived through tumultuous times in the world had just a much more natural understanding of how the real world works and what the risks were. And one like little illustration of that, which doesn't really involve Israel, it tangentially involves Israel, is that the left and right both thought it was self-evident that we had to respond to Soviet missiles in Cuba. And we were ready to take the world to the brink of war in order to make sure that there were no nuclear weapons in Cuba. And then as I was growing up, nuclear proliferation was considered to be the number one issue on the left, right? On the left. And then we arrived sometime like in the 2010s, where you could tell people were like, well, we should try to prevent Iran from getting nuclear bomb. But you know what? Maybe we can live with it, whatever it is. You know, when obviously an Iranian bomb was far more risky to the world than a Soviet bomb ever was. The geography no longer mattered. You know, didn't matter anymore that it's around the world because it can get here very, very quickly. But the level of responsibility, both to prevent intentional attacks, but also accidental launches, is crazy with Iran, right? So that juxtaposition of how one generation reacted to a threat and how their grandchildren reacted to what really is the same threat, only worse in every way, I think is a perfect illustration of how, was it Toynbee? You know, if you don't remember the past, you're destined to relive it. That we're not remembering the past. I guess it's beyond human ability. You can read about something, but there is something about living through something which is just different than most people's capacity to internalize lessons simply from the written word. That's just
one. I'm not on the right. I'm not a Republican. So can I ask you one question? I don't understand. So I know the big issue on the right for many years has been immigration, right? Why aren't they trying to pass cut legal immigration, right? They always or change the composition, right? What do they just have no policy?
Why are they trying to cut immigration?
Why aren't they? Because that's like their big thing.
Yeah.
So why
I mean, immigration is very complicated because there is, no matter what. I'm a child of immigrants.
And I'm not asking like your personal view. I'm saying
no, but I'm going to use that to launch into the right. So I guess I want to confess to where I reverberate with some ideas that have come from the right. So I grew up, extremely pro-immigrant. I remember when any one who worked for us, usually Muslims and Arabic, would get their citizenship. This was always a happy day for my father. He would go to the thing. So we celebrated nothing like becoming an American. At some point, we began to see immigrants coming to America, legal and illegal, I have to say, with a different attitude of assimilation and patriotism and love of America than the previous generations did. So, when I was a kid, Yasha Heifetz, there was an immigrant, he would lift an American flag every day. My father, who lived through all American anti-Semitism, he was here during Father Coughlin, right? He would bring tears to his eyes. Any pro-American, Abraham Lincoln type movie, like he was America through and through. He thought it should be illegal to burn a flag. I mean, literally nothing mattered to him more than America. But if I speak to my immigrant employees and they know, if you say, what do you think of America? They're like, I'm here to make money. I'd go back, America is the bad guy in many of their national stories. They didn't. Their technology allows them to stay in constant contact. When I was a kid, and when my father was a kid, there were no long distance phone calls. When I was a kid, a long distance phone call was a family event that cost $100 and to make it 3 minutes. Now you literally can talk for free. So there's no clean breaks anymore. So all this was bad for the social fabric of the country. And we did wake up at one point and realize that we were at each other's throats. And this is no way to run a business, even if the people who came here and they think America's a bad guy and everything are right. And sometimes they are right. It doesn't matter because we have to have a social fabric and we all have to be on the same team. And so I had to admit that, well, something seems to be going wrong. Maybe we need to slow the pace. When the left was saying that melting pot is a racist term, bilingual education, all these things, I began to get queasy that even though I loved the idealistic notion of America and a mosaic and all that stuff, that, as I said in Oppenheimer, that theory will only take you so far, that we had to recognize. And by the way, I feel the same way about free speech now. We have to recognize that somehow the way things are working out are simply not the way we thought they would work out. And let's not be afraid to look at it. And consider, I'm making a very long answer, but there's no way around it.
No.
So that's the right. But there's another side to it, which is that the right, some of them are racist. They don't want these people in here, not for the reasons that I'm saying, but they don't like them because they're brown or this or that. That's disgusting. On the other hand, there's also on the right a lot of rich people who own businesses who are quite aware that we need the labor. So, and Trump is very sensitive to his economic numbers, and he knows that young labor, young labor fuels the economy. So right now, but they have accomplished the lion's share of what they wanted to accomplish, which is there's almost zero illegal immigration at the border right now. And I think vis-a-vis Donald Trump, maybe not vis-a-vis Steve Bannon, certainly not Tucker Carlson, I think that is what Trump really wanted to accomplish.
Well, it's sort
That's
of
a
funny.
long answer.
It's sort of funny. Tucker's dropped immigration now. He's just a Jew baiter. But
yeah.
My point was, I wasn't arguing the merits. I was saying, I had this interaction. This Irish Nazi said, "Oh, the reason Ireland's flooded with immigrants because of the Irish Jews." I was like, "There's 12 Irish Jews," there's something funny about these guys who they would just say it's the Jews' fault, but they get into power and then it's like,
well, that's Charlottesville was about the Jews being behind replacement theory.
It's just funny, like they get into power and it's like they don't have some let's cut legal immigration bill. They never actually try to do anything.
Well, I give a very, very, very long answer, but I don't know that there's a huge constituency or a critical mass constituency, even on the right, to end legal immigration. The real huge constituency was around illegal immigration. And now I think the smart minds, even the Stephen Millers, are understanding, okay, we still have an economy to worry about. We still have demographics. We still have people getting older. Let's see how this works out. Lather, rinse, repeat.
They're fine with immigration. I think they just prefer it be Russians and white immigrants. I want to end on,
of course, but that's not going to happen.
I want to end on Israel.
Yeah.
Who's winning right now? There's this funny thing where all these people who say it was a genocide in Gaza, they make these videos, and they've been doing it for a while. I just saw one with John Mearsheimer. The title was "The End of Israel." Like, Israel is done. And I've interviewed a lot of Israelis. One thing that disturbs me is, and God bless them for this, they have this optimism. I'll always ask them. They'll be like, oh, we were in a worse situation before, we got through it. I don't think they have enough fear of catastrophe. And I do. I actually think Israel, if they don't, what I always say is they should either swerve left or swerve right dramatically. Don't stay on the current course because it's a bad course for Israel. Do you disagree?
Well, I don't. That's why I say my spoiled child there, because they did try swerving left. They offered repeatedly
Right.
everything that anybody really has wanted them to offer, and they got violence in return. And what are you going to do? Like, I mean, I've in my weaker moments toyed with the notion that maybe they should just unilaterally withdraw. Like, but that's like, if that was an option, you could try to see how it worked out. Like, yeah, try, but it's not. It's a it's a permanent step. It didn't work out in Gaza, so I understand. Like, I got to steel myself. No, they can't unilaterally withdraw from the West Bank. I don't know the answer, but it's not the end of Israel. I mean, how would it end? In genocide?
No,
Like,
no,
Israel's
no,
not
no,
going anywhere.
You should listen. People should listen to these anti-Israel fanatics, and it's hard to because they're so evil. But I was listening to a space of them, and basically they're very clear. We're going to give you the Rhodesia treatment. We're going to make you a pariah, and I don't think it should be laughed off at all, because of Israel is very small. I think, but on current trajectory, you feel good about Israel?
No, I don't feel good, but I'm not. I don't know, but I say this. I think that it's very clear from two indications that the Arab world, the responsible Arab world, is on Israel's side and is wanting to stay close to Israel, I guess because of Iran. So nobody left the Abraham Accords. Nobody even postured, as far as I know. I could be wrong. Certainly not any high profile about leaving the Abraham Accords. And also seems pretty clear that Saudi Arabia, even after the quote unquote genocide, is still horny to make a deal with Israel, if only world events could allow them to do it and have some sort of cover for doing it. So if the entire Arab world, if much of the Arab world, let's presume there is a deal with Saudi Arabia, is an ally of Israel, there's only so pariah you can make it in vis-a-vis their mistreatment of the Arab people. It's not zero pariah, but it's you would hope that it would at least diffuse or in some way dilute the issue. And like I said, but there is a triage thing here, and this has been my biggest fear, is they're making Afrikaners out of us, Rhodesia. But first thing is first in a triage situation is you have to before you get to that, you have to get to the first step. You can't just skip over it. So people do all the time. They skip over the first step. And the first step is they have to survive now. And Hamas, if Hezbollah and Iran and Hamas had joined in together on October 7th, what would have happened? And are you prepared to ever let Israel get itself into that vulnerable situation again? The answer has to be, I believe, no. We are lucky as hell that the worst case scenario didn't happen. We underestimated the worst case scenario. We didn't think they were serious about it. We thought we had bought them off. Now we know, holy shit, we dodged. October 7th was bad. It was nothing compared to what easily could have happened. And we can never, ever, ever again let ourselves get in that situation. And once you can solve that question, you can start talking to me about pariah.
But solve what question? Because Hamas is still there.
How you avoid getting yourself in that situation ever again.
Right.
And having the world not call you, make you a pariah.
So,
and by the way, there is no answer to that. That's the problem.
So I'm going to end on the hardest questions. I think Israel probably is just, if you put a gun to my head, they are just in sort of an impossible situation. Mm-hmm. So first thing I want to ask you is this. I wonder if the Occam's razor truth about Israel-Palestine is this. Tell me what you think. At the end of World War II, what was it, like 15 million ethnic Germans were moved out of Czechoslovakia and Poland. India and Pakistan, millions of people were moved. In the 40s, like millions of people were moved around at the end of wars to sort of definitively end them. In the case of the 1948 war, they sort of left that war on a slow burner. It was not decisively ended. And again in 1967, Israel created these two limbo regions, the West Bank and Gaza, right? Where the people there, are they citizens, are they not? It wasn't clear, and Israel hasn't been able to make a decision. And I think it basically left the Palestinians there where it's so tantalizing. They're still right there. So the war I don't think the war of 1948 ever ended. I think it's just been on a slow burner because it was never decisively ended. And I wonder if the tragedy is just if in 1967 or whatever, as horrible as it would have been, if Israel had, and it would have gotten horrible, it would have destroyed relationships. But if all the Gazans, if all the people, the Arabs in the West Bank became Jordanians, became Egyptians, and maybe there wouldn't be any conflict. I'm not saying it's ethical or whatever, but I wonder about that.
No, of course. I mean, this is what Benny Mars got in trouble for speculating about. Look, you know, nobody should want to shut down this kind of conversation or try to characterize it as anybody who wants to see anybody cleansed or, you know, taken out of their country. The question is, philosophical one, and it's moot, is that when you weigh outcomes, one outcome is what we've seen, and it seems to, you know, as far as the eye can see, which is bloody violence, and by the way, much more suffering on the Arabic people, you know, 100 to 1. I don't even know, like, you know, it can't be, not just suffering in, as I said, not just suffering in death, but in squalor and just lack of fulfillment, and in a million different ways. I mean, you know, Israel's a very happy country. As opposed to what would have been, you know, not unprecedented in the world, people that were treated unjustly and thrown out, and then they would have at some point been over it. But, you know, and to make your point, I'm not
advocating anything.
Wait, no, but it's a very important part of your point that I think you left out, which is that traditionally when people are kicked out, like when the Jews are kicked out of countries, they're just kicked out, you know, into other countries. What you're discussing is that you're saying that they've been kicked out to live in their own country. Well, meaning in 48, there's a partition to be an Israeli country and a Palestinian country. So everybody who would be thrown out would have been thrown out to live in the Palestinian country. Now, you know, there's no answer to that. It wasn't foreseeable. As for 67, because I don't want to get the chapters mixed up. That's in 48. 67 is a different issue. Benny Morris has said that, you know, in retrospect, Israel should have just given back the West Bank and Gaza right after 67. That's, you know, that is a hell of a hindsight thing to say, because you know how it worked out. At the time, that seemed like a crazy thing to do because they had just attacked from those lands. And so, you know, you're going to give it back to them now? But yes, probably that's right. If Israel had the foresight to have just backed out, found a way to give it back then, maybe they wouldn't be in a situation, or maybe there'd just be a base for more attacks.
I'm not advocating for anything. It's just I've been wondering, is it really simple? The entire thing is simple. The 1948 war was never decisively ended. The Palestinians still think the game is going on.
Why would it have been decisively ended if they'd thrown everybody out?
if they're in Egypt, if they're in Jordan.
But they were in '67, and they attacked.
Well, I think distance matters a little bit.
No, I don't do it. In '48 they didn't have the West Bank.
Oh,
so
yeah.
So if you meant throw out the existing Arab Israelis, like the Arab Israelis.
No, I'm not talking about the Arab Israelis. No.
So who do you want to throw out?
No, I'm not saying throwing one out. I'm saying I'm saying creating these Gaza. I'm not sure Gaza and the West Bank make sense. They don't really make sense what they are, and Israel's never really. Are they in? Are they out? Right? And it's never been able to make a decision about them. Right? And I think that's, it's.
I come back to my spoiled child theory, is that if one party is not interested in what we're interested in, we meaning Israel. If one party is not interested in ending the conflict, they're not interested in peace. They're interested in wiping off the psychological humiliation of Israel. Period. End of story.
Okay, two-state solution. You're a lawyer, right?
I went to law school. I never practiced, yeah.
Now, I asked an Israeli friend of mine this question, and I was shocked that he said he doesn't know. In these plans for a Palestinian state, how they say it's going to be demilitarized? Have you seen what they say about if the state breaks that rule and, let's say they start bringing in WMDs, is there a penalty in those deals for that?
In which deals?
You know how they say it will be a demilitarized Palestinian state?
I mean, under which suggestion?
Remember, Macron when
Camp David? Oh, Macron. Yeah. Oh, you mean for Gaza?
Now, and in Camp David, they say it will be.
I see what you mean. This recognition of the Palestinian state by the England and France.
And they said it will be a demilitarized Palestinian state.
It's all meaningless.
So there's no penalty mechanism?
No. If there was one, it wouldn't be worth the paper it was written on anyway.
So this is a legal question.
There can't be. If you recognize a state, I mean, obviously it's a symbolic thing they did, but recognize a state, you can't put restrictions on. I mean, a state has sovereignty, right?
But they all say it has to be demilitarized.
Yeah, but I'm saying there's no state like that. That's becomes a product of negotiation. A state, a sovereign people has to agree to that. That's why this has to be negotiated. It's.
But can I ask? Because I asked ChatGPT this: if Palestinians got a state, let's say, and they invaded Israel 5 times in 5 years, and they killed 1 million Israelis, okay? And on the 5th time, Israel was like, okay, we're going to take 15 feet of this Palestinian state. I asked ChatGPT, would that be legal under international law? And said no. And actually, I think it was true, technically, partially.
There's a big flaw in international law that everybody knows doesn't make sense, which is that you just get endless do-overs. You never have to take a haircut. But that's not the way the world works.
Have they ever addressed that? Is there any penalties if a Palestinian state just kept attacking Israel? Is it okay, special circumstances because the land's so small? You can no.
No, and listen, I'm barely know about the American law, let alone international law. But by analogy, there's been every law is then chiseled down and refined and even distorted for the greater good by a whole series of real world experiences and then judicial opinions. International law is this kind of idealistic framework out there that has never really been put to the test by the hundreds of thousands of difficult cases that are then tested by a judge, then an appeal, then a Supreme Court decision. So there is this obviously glaring flaw, which is that if one side just keeps attacking, keeps attacking. And let's say let's make it like it's a mountain, and they use this mountain to constantly, and then
And
the
it's
side
so small.
recaptures the mountain, recaptures the mountain.
Yeah.
It has to keep giving it back, even as the other side signs, yes, we agree to that, and then tomorrow they do it again. Obviously, that makes a mockery of international law, and usually when the real world behavior makes a mockery of a law, the judges come in and they alter the interpretation of the law in some way under the presumption that the promulgators of a law never meant it to be ridiculous, right? So, yeah, so that's the answer. There's no good answer to that.
So have you given up on a two-state solution?
No, it's the only thing there can be is a two-state solution.
Okay.
Not right now.
So here's my challenge about that. The topography.
Mm-hmm.
If they have the high ground above Ben Gurion Airport, it's 5 miles from, like it's so easy to hit. Do you think that map could really work with the Palestinians having all the high ground?
Listen, I'm a very skeptical, cynical person, but you always have to be careful because things do change. The cynical people are proven wrong. South Africa didn't descend into, horrors. And at some point, I hope, and maybe, if President Trump digs in and actually they really try to de-radicalize Gaza like they say, or if maybe not, maybe if some gifted young Palestinian rises and preaches a different message and turns the tide, at some point things can change. Egypt did make peace. The Saudis were interested. Like we've seen things change before, and I can't understand Islam and how that pushes things, but there is the reality, which is that it is unpleasant to live in an occupied country. It's unpleasant would be a glib way to describe what's going on in Gaza. So if somebody says, hey, Eureka, let's advocate, let's pressure Israel now for a two-state solution, and let's really mean it, and let's agree to make peace. And yeah, I can see it's reasonable that the Israelis might want a 25-year transition period where we have to prove ourselves. That makes sense, but I don't like it. But wouldn't it be better than what we're living through now? It's not, none of this is impossible to believe. I'm not predicting it, but over 100 years, it becomes even more likely. I don't, I'm not predicting it, but I'm not saying it's impossible. I don't feel it's impossible.
But you had a net wealth fund. I looked up one time how many Palestinians living there actually advocate for two states as a end state, and it literally only could find like 4 people.
Right, but the polls show the Shikaki, is that his name?
Shikaki,
show some number of people, Palestinians who supported, and there were times when it was a higher number.
No, but the question is that end state part. That's the fine print.
Yeah, I mean, my only point is that when something actually, when the substance of a matter actually is in the objective interest of a people, it would be foolish to think they could never be convinced and realize, oh, this is where our interests really lie. If it was absolutely never in their interest, like you think you could convince the slaves ever to say, yeah, we always want to be slaves? No. But could you convince the Palestinian people, guys, you have an obligation to be realistic here. You must be able to see that this is not working. Look at what happened October 7th. At some point, this pendulum, they're not saying it out loud now, but there's got to be some number of Palestinians who are looking at what happened in Gaza and say, what were we thinking? Did we really fool ourselves into thinking that we could beat Israel? Maybe, and from that, maybe something emerges. I don't know. Why not? It's not crazy.
Have you seen much of that from Gazans? Because I've seen many videos that...
Well, they'll be killed if they come publicly with that now. So it's...
Okay.
I'm just saying, again, I'm not predicting it. But there is a dynamic of reality here, and I'm just repeating myself. The reality is, if they see what's in their own self-interest, they will come around in some way. And that's never impossible to imagine of people coming around to their own self-interest.
And you think the topography issue isn't like it doesn't?
No.
No.
I mean, Israeli leaders at the time, Barak and Olmert, and even Netanyahu at one time, according to Indyk, didn't see that as insurmountable.
Okay.
I'm no expert.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Noam. I hope sometime in the future we can talk again. There's a lot of hopefully. What I would say is, I've reassured myself things are really bad right now after 2 years of war. I don't think we can assess how bad the situation is till about 6 months to a year after the war, because maybe you're right. Maybe people will forget and become less anti-Jewish, but hopefully
it has to wane to some extent because it's not a daily provocation. So it's hard to keep people ginned up. Once this is out of their news feed every day, they're not going to fall in love with the Jews. But it's not. It's like imagine Tucker Carlson or Candace Owens like railing against the Jews every day in exactly the same thing, but in 2021. Like, what are you talking about? Like what? Why are you like? There's nothing going on in the world. Why are you so?
Well, Benny, you could say the same thing about Charlie Kirk. How could you blame that on Israel? I mean, they are.
Oh, what's going on now? Yeah.
They're coming up with. What the new anti-Semitic thing is? That ChatGPT is a Talmudic ritual. You're going to see that. Yeah.
Tucker Carlson said that. Yeah.
Anyways, thank you so much, Noam. Thank you for
My
what
pleasure.
you do.
My pleasure.